Hello, everyone. Helen Murphy at the Journal here with another COVID-19 video news report. This time we're talking with Sherrie Gold and Dan Goodsell, cruise line entertainers who ended up spending 63 days at sea while their ship tried to find a place to dock and get staff back home. They are very grateful to be back home now in Sheet Harbour, and that's where we reached them this morning. Hello, Sherrie and Dan. How are you both today?
Good. How are you?
Thank you.
Good. You're at home in Sheet Harbour, safe and sound?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Sherrie and Dan and you folks can take turns answering questions if you want, but we're really eager to hear about your adventure at sea. But first of all, can you tell us a little bit about what it is you do in your work with cruise lines?
That's me.
That's you.
We are a musical duo. So Dan plays guitar and sings, and we use backing tracks, and then I'm the host, the lead singer. So we go on cruise ships for take contracts that are usually 4 months. I mean, we've been doing this with just the cruise ships for the last 2 years or so, but we go on and we play 6 nights a week for 4:45s a night usually. So it's a full schedule for sure.
Yeah, it sounds busy. I'm sure some people listening would think that sounds like a pretty exciting way to make a living. It's a fun way to make a living. I'm sure you meet lots of interesting people. When you went on your last assignment, when you first started out, was there any sign then that the pandemic was spreading in North America, and were you concerned?
No, there was no signs at all. So there was, no concern because there was no signs of any kind.
We left in December.
Yeah, we left December 10th. So it was before anything had happened.
Right. And was it in Australia? Did you leave from Australia?
Yes, we flew to Australia and left from there.
Okay.
That was our call.
Home base, yeah.
Right. Okay. So tell us what happened when things kind of started to go bad, when it was obvious that there was going to have to be some changes made, passengers were going to be let off, the pandemic was spreading. How did that all come about?
It came about rather gradually, where they started putting certain things in place, meaning passengers weren't allowed on without their temperature checked, and there was just mandatory things that were happening even for us on the ship. So then they had a big meeting sort of to reiterate a lot of the new rules that were being put in place to make us feel better. But then it was like literally the same day where the US had stopped all ships from cruising, and we knew we were shortly going to be after that. So we did set sail, I think, the next day to do our last, which ended up being our last cruise. And it was during that cruise that they made us come in early. The Australian government was cutting all cruising in the area and made all the ships come back to disembark their passengers.
Right. So the passengers did get off at that point, but the staff had to stay on. What happened then?
Well, they tried to get a lot of the staff off that were scheduled to get off first and foremostly, and then a lot of extra ones, like some of the contract workers that and casino people, like people that don't necessarily work directly for Carnival, but Carnival hires companies out. So they did try to get a lot of people off the best that they could. Imagine processing all those people with flights and all the immigration. So they really did the best they could. There's 3 people that, ultimately work in HR. So they definitely had their hands full, for sure.
Right. So when it was at the point where it was just staff on board, where did the ship go and what was happening?
At that point, we were still in Australia. We stayed in Australian waters for approximately a month, I would think. Anchored just offshore. We weren't allowed to dock anywhere because the Australian government was like, no way, you're not docking here. As far as the Australian government was concerned, we were the whole cruise ships in general were the whole reason the pandemic ever got to Australia.
Right.
That's what that was their mindset at the time. So we were not allowed to dock anywhere. So we sat off the coast of Australia for approximately a month before we set sail for the Philippines so that we could take the Philippine crew, because the majority of crew on the ships are Philippine. So we had set sail to Manila so that we could have a chance to let them get home.
Right. So when you got to Manila, the staff who were from the Philippines were able to get off, but the rest of you had to stay on?
Well, they had to be in quarantine first. The Philippine government was all their land-based quarantine places were overrun. There were so many people that they sent doctors and security out to our ship, and I'm assuming all the other ships, to make sure it was set up properly and have the Philippine crew quarantine on the ship. So they were in their rooms to stay in their rooms for the 14 days before they could get off.
Right. So once that quarantine happened and they got off, folks like you were still on board, right? What was in store for you at that point?
It didn't happen. It didn't happen the way we had expected. They did their 14 days, and the Philippine government still wasn't letting them go. So, so they had to stay on longer, and then they eventually came on and they tested them. Correct? They did.
About 4 days before the quarantine was finished for all the Filipinos, the medical team came on and actually did swabs on them as well. So they were waiting for those test results to come in. So even when the Filipinos were finished their quarantine, because the test results weren't in, they still weren't allowing them to get off. So they ended up being in quarantine quite some time, at least each of them 16, 17 days. And then they started to allow the ones that whose test, there was a cyclone, a typhoon coming through, no less. So on that day, they were a little more lenient, and they started letting off the ones whose test results had come in. And when they allowed those people off, which was I think 150 or so maybe that day, they started allowing us to get off. That was when we were able to get off.
Right. So how many days were you on board at that point?
Oh, 62. Well, without getting off, we were 62, 63 days.
Without passengers.
But then we had been on for a total of 5 months. We all had a brave face, and I will say the morale on our ship was really good. Our captain was awesome. All the management was really good about communicating to us. Our company in general was really good about communicating to us. And that makes a very big difference. You know, even when there wasn't something to report to us, they would at least, you know, make announcements saying, you know, this is sort of where we're at still. And because, you know, they're jumping through a lot of hoops with these governments, you know, from the morning to evening, they'll change their mind. They'll promise us something, and then, oh no, we can't do that for you after all. So I think that in a lot of cases, and the young people especially, just felt, you know, they're without their parents. They just felt really lost and alone.
Yeah, no, it must have been very hard.
I mean, it is a cruise ship and you are in a hotel room, but you know, you're not privileged to the same.
We were fortunate that they moved us and all our crew into guest cabins.
Okay.
If there was crew that had to stay in their own crew cabins, we're talking very tiny rooms with no windows.
Yeah.
So if the lights are out, it's pitch black 24 hours a day. So if you're confined to those cabins, that would have been mentally, that would have been incredibly bad. Hopefully that didn't happen to a lot of people, but
still, we know it did happen for some. So it's just, it is a feeling of, you know, it's the uncertainty of when am I ever going to see my family again. Even for us, we thought, oh my gosh, we're not going to get home till August or September. Like it was really not looking good for a while. And you go a little rangy. I had an analogy the other day about, it's almost like you go to the mall. You go to the mall and there's places to sit, and you know, there's a little bit of Wi-Fi, but it's a little sketchy. And you spend 12, 15 hours a day there, but nothing's open. So that's circle.
That's a good way for the rest of us, I think, to understand it. Tell us, drawing on that idea, say in that last 30-day period, what was your daily routine like, or was there a daily routine?
You try to make a routine.
You try to make a routine. Yeah. Yes, you definitely do. And we did okay. We did a lot of walking. We tried to get outside and walk as much as we, you know, could. After every meal, at least do some laps. And we did have a gym, and you were allowed to go to the gym. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was, you know, socially distanced, of course. Right. You know, we were allowed, so that helped. And we
did the gym every day. I played guitar every day. I sat by myself and played guitar. Sherrie was helping
Just teaching a young
teaching
girl
some
to sing.
singing lessons, and
Okay.
you make friends with some of the other crew that don't look very happy, so you kind of pull them into your. I mean, it's different for us, right? We're older and we're a couple on the ship, whereas so many of these young kids, it's their first time even being away from home, and they're like 22, 23 years old. So you kind of, bring them in and play cards and just hang out with them, and be the mom and pop.
Yeah. Good. I'm sure that helped them a lot. And as you say, you were probably in a better situation than some boats, right? Because you didn't have COVID-19 on your ship. And that was a whole different ballgame for ships that had COVID-19.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, we were very, very fortunate.
Yeah.
Not having COVID on our ship was some of the frustration as to why we weren't allowed to dock anywhere.
Right.
Really, because we had spent, at one point, when we left Australian waters, we had been over a month with no COVID on the ship at all, and they wouldn't even let us come in for supplies. It was like,
Right.
Yes.
it was strange.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I can see the frustration in that. So what do you think about, this has been your career. What do you think about the future of the cruise line industry, and are you going back to work? And if so, when might that happen?
As far as the future of the cruise line industry, that's almost impossible to say. It'll never stop. I don't think it'll ever stop. The people that cruise love to cruise. There's no doubt about it. And they will do it again. There's going to be a lot of changes, obviously, especially things like, buffet and certain things like that. As far as us going back to work, we will go back to work. I mean, you can't live in fear by any means. I would like to wait until the ships have been up and running for a while first to make sure,
we're not in any hurry.
to make sure everything is good. But, maybe at the end of this year, maybe in the new year, we're in no rush.
We're in no rush.
Yeah. And you're back home in Sheet Harbour now, which is a beautiful, beautiful place to be in the summertime. Between now and then, when you might go back, are you just taking some downtime, or are you going to be doing entertaining locally, or what's your plan?
Just downtime. Usually when we come home, we just usually,
Yeah.
take it easy for sure. It's pretty intense on the ship. I know people don't think that, 4 hours a night is very much, but when you're an entertainer, and especially a female entertainer, that, you have to, it takes time to get ready and whatnot. It's pretty taxing. So when we come home, it's usually just, hey,
yeah,
we like to chill out.
We do things that need to get done around the house like
Yeah,
everybody else
yeah.
does, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good. And we wish you all the best for your downtime in Sheet Harbour. And thanks for sharing your story, both in the journal, our paper copy this week, and on our talk today on video. And maybe we'll touch base with you again when you're ready to go back and see what that's like in that point in your lives.
Yeah, that could be interesting. Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, take care.
Bye-bye.